So you will better understand the concept of areas turned from the light, I've drawn these diagrams of a face. The first shape is the shape of the oval, the shape of the outline of the head. And the next shape I like to paint is the shape of the shadow. And that shadow shape has to be a consistent 40% darker than the sunlit side if you're going to give the illusion of sunlight. Our model is in full sunlight. Therefore, I'm going to have to be sure that I get this 40% value relationship between the sunlit and the shadow side. All you have to do is to figure out what 40% is. We see about 12 to 16 values, but in order to get a 40% difference, I've made this value scale, and I started with my watercolor paper as value 1, and then I painted black as very dark as I could get it right out of the tube. I was using Payne's Gray. Now, if my sunlit side is, say, value 2, then all I have to do is leave 3 values in the middle, and here's the 4th value, and so I know that my shadow side is going to be value 6. It's just a shortcut into getting your values right before you ever get started painting. People ask me, what about these areas that are turned from the light that I very carefully drew on my drawing? These areas are not as dark as this. And some of these areas are going to be darker than others because they're further turned from the light, closer to the shadow side. You can see that it's slightly darker, perhaps right along this area here and under here, where it's turned under further, but right in here it's relatively light. So I've prepared a diagram here so I can show you how we'll do that. These little yellow half moons here is to indicate that the sun is overhead, the only place it can be. Now let's assume that the sun is coming in this direction, and so we know that the shadow side is going to be 40% darker. My lightest value here is somewhere around value 2. It's actually somewhere in here, so I'll just say it's here. So I'm going to count down 1, 2, 3, and make my shadow side somewhere between these two. So here comes the shadow side. Let's just assume that it washes down this side of the face. It comes over this eye. We'll just say this whole side of the face is in shadow. So I'm going to wash this right over the eye, down under the nose. I'm sure it puts a cast shadow down this way over the nose. Then we'll make the whole upper lip in shadow. Then perhaps the shadow comes down here under the lip, under here and around here. And then we'll just fill this side in with the shadow. And because there could be reflected light, while that's still wet, I'm going to charge in some yellow all the way down the face. And I also know that this nose is sticking out, so it's going to get some reflected light here and possibly underneath. And that there's usually some reflected light up under the eyebrow. Let's make it that sort of a violet reflected light. And I've got to be sure to paint in the ear because it's dark too. The ear will probably get reflected light on the earlobe just at the bottom here. Okay, then the next thing that I would do normally would be I would soften the edges on the rounded surfaces because edges on rounded surfaces are soft. Notice that my brush is very dry and I'm just pulling it along the edge. Pull it down the edge of the nose, across here, on that, and around here. Okay, so that becomes the shadow side of the face. Now what happens over here, you can see that this whole side of the face is going to be dark, and it's going to be dark up in here. This is about all you're going to be able to see with looking right down at the head. Of course, the top of the head is going to be in shadow too. As I dried this edge became harder than I want it to be. So to correct that, I'm going to take my soft half-inch flat brush and just run along the edge of it. The brush is just barely moistened. And that retrieves my soft edge. So now we'll get back to this. Squint your eye and you'll see that my value has to be somewhere right in here. It's lighter than this and darker than that. It's right here. There's one other shadow shape that's going to happen, and it's going to be, if the sun is coming this way, it's going to be right here, over the eye. Sun coming down will hit that. Okay, and then the neck. Okay. Now for the areas that are turned from the light. You can see if the sun is coming at this angle, it's going to hit the top of the nose at an oblique angle. And it's also going to hit this edge of the cheek at an oblique angle, and the sun will be very bright right on the edge of the cheek and on the edge of the nose. That would be this edge of the nose and this edge of the cheek. So I'm just going to use the same color I used in the shadow shape, but a very lighter value, and try to gauge the variety of values I use with the help of my little man here. Now you notice that there's a shape that goes right over the nose, like that. It's where the indentation between the eyes and the top of the nose. And that little spot right there will help determine the shape of the nose. It'll help your viewer see that that is an indentation right there. Then right here over the forehead, you can, this is the part here that's turned back from the light. So I'll just slop some of that in. Soften the edge. Now this part here that's under the eye, just right down here next to the nose, kind of fits in there like that. So I'll soften that edge. Then you can see this rounded cheek here. There could be a cast shadow right under that cheek that I left out, but you can see that by just softening that edge and adding a facial plane, you can see that it's starting to do this. Also, this part of the center of the nose, this little indented area over the top of the nose, is going to get cooler right in that spot there. So we'll just put a little color in there. Under the lip, this part right here is turned back, so we can just slop some of that right in there. And then, of course, this part down here on the chin also is beginning to be turned from the light, so we'll just put some of that in right there. I'm going to turn my paper around to soften the edge, pull my color up. Also, the front of the neck is turned from the light just as the top of the nose is, so I'm going to pull this color down in here. And I'll put just a touch of that on the top of the nose. The ear is also turned back further from the light. So there. Can you see that this now begins to have more form? I've missed one place, and that's on the lower lip. It turns away from the light, so I am going to put a little color right here, right across the bottom of the lip. And again, soften the edge. There's a couple of places that are definitely always dark, so I'm going to darken it still yet. I'm using alizarin and burnt umber. Then I'm going to put a little spot right here, a little place right here. Nostrils go in here. There's always a little spot there.